The child's blood left dark drops in the snow. Silas Cordell heard the pounding on his cabin door and knew bone deep that his careful solitude was ending. When he pulled it open, the girl collapsed forward, her small hands clutching his coat, her voice breaking with words no child should have to speak. "Please, sir. They hurt Mama real bad this time. She can't get up. She told me to run and find help before he comes back to finish it." Behind her, the Montana night held its breath. The girl's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Silas Cordell knelt in his doorway, eye level with the child, and felt something crack open inside his chest that he'd kept sealed for 7 years. She couldn't have been more than 6, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her dress torn at the shoulder, and when she lifted her small arm, he saw the handprint bruise dark purple against pale skin. "What's your name, little one?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Annabeth." She gulped air between words. "Annabeth Ashford. My mama's Grace. Please, mister, please. He kicked her so hard she can't breathe right." Silas stood slowly, his shadow falling across the child. At 40 years old, he'd spent the last 7 winters alone in this cabin on the edge of Covenant Falls, Montana. Folks in town called him the Silent Blacksmith, not because he couldn't talk, but because he chose not to. He'd learned that words were cheaper than action, and most men spent too many of the former without enough of the latter. "Where's your mama now?" "The old trapper's shack, by Weston Creek." Annabeth's teeth chattered. "He left to get whiskey. Mama said when he comes back drunk he'll kill her this time. She made me promise to run." Silas reached for his coat. "Get inside. Warm yourself by the fire." "You're coming." Hope lit the child's face, making her look even younger. "I'm coming." He grabbed his rifle, not because he wanted to use it, but because Silas Ashford had a reputation, and reputations in these parts usually told the truth. As Silas hitched his horse, his hands moved through motions he'd done 10,000 times, but his mind was somewhere else. 7 years he'd kept to himself. 7 years since Martha died, bringing their stillborn son into this world. 7 years of silence because the world had seemed too loud with his own grief. Now a child's blood spotted his porch, and silence felt like cowardice. The ride to Weston Creek took 20 minutes through timber so thick the moonlight barely touched ground. Annabeth sat in front of him, wrapped in his coat, not speaking, but trembling. Once she whispered, "Mama's real pretty. She used to sing before he made her stop." Silas's jaw tightened. He'd seen Silas Ashford around town, a man who spoke too loud, laughed too harsh, and treated his horse the way he probably treated everything smaller than him. Silas had watched once as Cyrus yanked Grace by the arm outside the mercantile, hissing something that made her flinch. Silas had turned away that day. Most men did. A man's wife was his business, they said. Tonight, that business was ending. The shack appeared through the trees, listing to one side its chimney cold. Silas dismounted and lifted Annabeth down. "Stay with the horse." "She's inside, in the back room." The door hung crooked on leather hinges. Silas pushed it open, and the smell hit him first. Stale whiskey, unwashed bodies, and underneath it all, blood. He stepped inside, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. Grace Ashford. A sound came from the corner. A woman's voice, thin and wary. "Who's there?" "Name's Silas Cordell. Your daughter came to my door." "No." The word came out sharp. "You need to leave. If Cyrus finds you here, then he'll find me here." Silas moved toward her voice. She was curled on a pile of old skins, one arm wrapped around her ribs. Even in the darkness, he could see her face was swollen, one eye completely shut. Her lip was split, and when she breathed, it came shallow and painful. "I can't." She tried to sit up and gasped. "I can't pay you. I have nothing." "I'm not asking for payment." Silas crouched beside her. "I'm getting you out." "Why?" The question came out broken. "You don't know me. Your daughter's got your blood on her dress. That's all I need to know." Grace Ashford stared at him with her one good eye, and something passed between them in that moment. Not romance, not attraction, but recognition. She saw a man whose hands weren't made into fists. He saw a woman who'd stopped begging for mercy, but hadn't stopped fighting to breathe. "He'll kill you," she whispered. "Cyrus will kill you for this." "He can try." Silas slid his arms beneath her as gently as he knew how, and she bit back a cry when he lifted her. She weighed almost nothing, her body slight from missed meals and hard years. He carried her through the shack, her head resting against his chest because she had no strength to hold it up. Outside, Annabeth ran forward. "Mama!" "I'm all right, baby." Grace's voice steadied for her daughter. "I'm all right now." Silas settled Grace onto his horse, then swung Annabeth up in front of her. He walked alongside, leading them through the dark timber, and nobody spoke. The only sounds were the horse's hooves crunching snow and Grace's labored breathing. They were halfway back to his cabin when Grace said, "They'll ruin you for this." Silas didn't turn around. "Let them try." "You don't understand how this town works. Cyrus has friends. His brother's the deputy. People will say—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "They'll say I wanted this, that I'm a loose woman who ran to another man's bed." What people say and what's true are two different things. Not in Covenant Falls. Silas kept walking. He'd lived in Covenant Falls long enough to know she was right. The town had 400 souls, one church, 2 saloons, and enough judgment to fill all 3. Folks there loved 2 things: gossip and keeping everyone in their proper place. A woman leaving her husband, no matter the reason, would be scandal enough. A woman taking shelter with a bachelor blacksmith would be crucifixion. But Silas had stopped caring about proper places 7 years ago. When they reached his cabin, he carried Grace inside, and laid her on his bed, the only bed. Annabeth climbed up beside her mother, pressing close. Silas stoked the fire high, then brought water and clean cloth. "I need to see where you're hurt worst," he said. Grace's cheeks flushed. "I can manage." "You can barely sit up." They stared at each other across the small room. Finally, Grace nodded. Silas worked in silence, cleaning the cuts on her face, checking her ribs for breaks. His hands were rough from years at the forge, but he touched her like she was made of glass. When he pressed too hard once and she sucked in air, he stopped immediately. "Sorry." "You're kinder than you look," Grace whispered. "I look kind." "You look terrifying." The corner of Silas's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He finished binding her ribs, then stepped back. "You should rest." "Where will you sleep?" "I'll make do." Grace caught his wrist. Her grip was weak, but it stopped him. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Silas looked down at her small hand on his arm, then at Annabeth, who'd fallen asleep clutching her mother's nightdress. "Because 7 years ago I learned what it feels like when nobody comes. When you're drowning and people walk right past because helping would be inconvenient. Your wife." "The doctor was at a barn dance. Didn't want to leave early. Said first babies take time." Silas's voice stayed flat. He was right. She took 12 hours to die. Grace's hand tightened on his wrist. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just rest." He pulled free gently and moved to the fire. Grace watched him for a long moment, then said, "Silas." "Yeah." "Thank you." He didn't answer, just added another log to the fire and settled into his chair, the rifle across his lap. Outside, snow began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The kind of snow that would cover tracks, the kind that might buy them one quiet night. But morning would come, and with it, Silas Ashford. Grace woke 3 times in the night. Each time Silas was there, adding wood to the fire, checking that Annabeth stayed covered, or simply sitting watch. The 3rd time near dawn, Grace spoke into the darkness. "He'll come for me." "I know." You can't fight him alone. He'll bring men. Silas didn't turn from the fire. Then he'll bring men. Why would you risk that? You don't owe us anything. Maybe I'm tired of not owing anybody anything. Grace fell silent. She watched his profile in the firelight, the strong jaw, the deep lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders carried a weight she couldn't see but somehow understood. Finally, she said, I have nowhere else to go. Then stay. People will talk. Let them. Your reputation. I buried my reputation with my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Grace closed her eyes, feeling something she hadn't felt in 6 years of marriage to Silas Ashford. Safety. Not the absence of danger. She knew danger was coming, but the presence of someone who wouldn't let her face it alone. When dawn broke gray and cold, Silas made coffee and cornmeal mush. Annabeth woke and ate like she hadn't seen food in days, which Silas suspected might be close to truth. Grace managed a few bites, though swallowing clearly hurt. I need to open the forge today, Silas said. People will notice if I don't. Grace's face went pale. He'll see you in town. Good. Better he finds me there than comes here while I'm gone. Silas. Grace. He said her name for the first time and it stopped her. I made my choice last night. Now I'm seeing it through. He left them with the rifle, though Grace's hands shook when he placed it in them. You know how to use this. My daddy taught me. Then teach Annabeth where the bolt is. If Cyrus comes before I'm back, I'll use it. Grace's voice was steady now. I won't go back. I'd rather die. You won't die. Silas held her gaze. And you won't go back. That's a promise. He rode into Covenant Falls under a sky that threatened more snow. The town woke slowly around him, smoke rising from chimneys, the mercantile's door opening old. Mrs. Weatherby sweeping her porch. Every person he passed stopped to stare. Word traveled faster than horses in towns this size, and Silas knew someone had already seen him riding out toward Weston Creek last night. The forge stood at the end of Main Street, a squat building with double doors and a chimney that usually sent sparks dancing. Silas got the fire going and was heating his first piece of iron when the door darkened. Sheriff Tom Brennan stepped inside. He was 50 thick around the middle, with a face that had seen too much whiskey and not enough sleep. Silas? Sheriff. Heard you had visitors last night? Silas hammered the iron, each strike ringing loud in the small space. Might have. Grace Ashford and her girl. Might be. Brennan sighed. Cyrus came to my office this morning. Says his wife ran off. Says she took his daughter. She didn't run off. Silas plunged the iron into water, steam hissing. She crawled away after he beat her near to death. That's his business. It stopped being his business when her 6-year-old came to my door bleeding. The sheriff shifted his weight. Look, Silas, I understand you wanting to help, but legally Grace is Cyrus's wife. He has rights. Rights. Silas set down his hammer and turned. He's got the right to break her ribs, to split her lip, to leave bruises on a child. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's legal. A man's got authority over his household. Then the law's wrong. They stared at each other. Finally, Brennan said, Cyrus wants her back. Today. If you don't hand her over, he's talking about getting a posse together. Let him try. Silas, think about what you're doing. You're making enemies you don't need. I've got one enemy. That's enough. The sheriff left, shaking his head. Silas went back to work, but he felt eyes on him all day. Women whispered behind their hands as they passed the forge. Men stopped to watch him work, their faces hard with judgment. By noon, 3 people had come to collect work they'd ordered and canceled instead. Can't do business with a man who breaks up marriages. Old Virgil Tucker said, not quite meeting Silas's eyes. Silas just nodded and handed back the deposit. The church bell was tolling 3 when Silas Ashford finally appeared. He came alone, not because he lacked courage, but because he wanted the town to see him as the wronged husband, dignified in his pain. He was a big man, thick through the chest, with hands that looked like they'd been made for breaking things. Cordell. Silas straightened from the anvil. Ashford. I want my wife back. She's not property to be returned. Cyrus's face darkened. She's my wife. That means she's mine by law and by God. You got no right to keep her. I'm not keeping her. She's choosing to stay. Choosing? Cyrus spat the word. You've poisoned her mind, filled her head with ideas about leaving. Grace knows her place. She knows her duty. Her duty isn't to be your punching bag. Cyrus took a step forward. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you a coward who beats women and children. The forge went silent. Cyrus's hands curled into fists, and for a moment Silas thought it would end right there, a brawl in the dirt that would settle nothing. But Cyrus wasn't stupid. He knew hitting the blacksmith in front of witnesses would turn the town against him. Instead, he smiled. It was the ugliest expression Silas had ever seen. You think you're noble? You think you're saving her? Cyrus's voice carried across the street, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're just another man who wants what's mine. Everyone in this town knows what you really want from Grace. They're already saying she's warming your bed. Then they're liars, same as you. Maybe. Cyrus shrugged. Or maybe Grace has always been a whore, and I was fool enough to marry her. Maybe she spread her legs for you the first night, grateful for a new provider. Silas moved before he could think. His fist caught Cyrus square in the jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The crowd that had gathered gasped. Silas stood over him, breathing hard. Say that again? Cyrus wiped blood from his mouth. His eyes glittered with triumph. Hit me again. Go ahead. Prove to everyone you're just a savage who can't control himself. Silas forced his hands open. Cyrus was baiting him, trying to make him the villain in this story. He stepped back. Grace isn't coming back to you. Not today. Not ever. Cyrus climbed to his feet. We'll see about that. This isn't over, Cordell. Not by a long shot. He walked away, and the crowd parted for him. Silas stood alone in front of his forge, feeling the weight of every eye on him. Then, from the crowd, one voice rose. Shame on you, Silas Cordell. It was Prudence Calloway, the minister's wife. She stood on the boardwalk, her face pinched with righteousness. Shame on you for breaking apart a Christian marriage. Whatever Grace told you, whatever lies she spun, a wife's place is with her husband. That's God's law. God's law doesn't include beating a woman senseless, Silas said. A husband has the right to discipline. Discipline. Silas's voice cracked like thunder. Is that what you call it when a 6-year-old runs through the night with blood on her dress? Discipline. Prudence's mouth thinned. You don't know what goes on in that house. Grace has always been willful, proud. Maybe she needed to be beaten. Silas looked around at all of them, the town he'd lived in for 15 years, the people he'd shod horses for, made tools for fixed plows for. Is that what you all think, that Grace deserved what Cyrus did? Silence answered him. Not the good kind. The kind that agreed without saying so. Finally, one man stepped forward. Doc Henderson, 70 years old, with hands that still stayed steady. I don't think she deserved it, Silas, and I'll say so to anyone who asks. That makes 2 of us, said a woman's voice. Sarah Brennan, the sheriff's wife, moved to stand beside the doctor. I've seen the bruises on Grace. Seen them for years. We all have. We just pretended not to. Sarah, the sheriff started. No, Tom. She turned to her husband. We pretended not to see, because it was easier than doing something. Silas did what we should have done years ago. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded, others turned away. But the silence had broken, and that was something. Silas nodded to Sarah and Doc Henderson, then walked back into his forge. He worked until dark, and nobody else came. When he finally headed home, the temperature had dropped, and new snow was falling. The cabin was warm when he entered. Grace had managed to make soup nothing fancy, just broth and vegetables, but the smell filled the small space. Annabeth was sitting by the fire, using a piece of charcoal to draw on a flat stone. "You're back," Grace said. She'd been standing by the window watching the trail. Relief flooded her face. "I'm back." "Cyrus came to town." "He came." "What happened?" Silas hung his coat. "He made his accusations. I made my position clear." "Did you?" Grace glanced at Annabeth. "Did you hurt him?" "Not as much as I wanted to." They ate in silence, Annabeth between them. The child had barely spoken since they arrived, just watched everything with old eyes. When she finished eating, she looked up at Silas. "Are you going to be my new papa?" Grace choked on her soup. "Annabeth." "It's all right," Silas said quietly. He looked at the little girl, at her hopeful face, and felt that crack in his chest widen. "I'm not your papa, but I'm your friend, and friends don't let bad things happen to each other. Mama says papa is bad." "Your papa is sick, sweetheart," Grace said quickly. "He's sick in his heart." "Can he get better?" Grace's eyes met Silas's across the table. He saw the question there, the desperate hope that maybe Cyrus would change, that this nightmare would end some way other than violence. But Silas had lived long enough to know better. "Some sicknesses don't heal," he said. After Annabeth fell asleep, Grace and Silas sat by the fire. She was stronger today, moving with less pain, though she still favored her right side. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For today. For all of it. You already thanked me. I'll keep thanking you until it feels like enough. It never will." Silas poked the fire. "You don't owe me anything, Grace." "I owe you everything." "No." He looked at her. "You're paying me back right now just by being here." "How?" "This cabin's been dead for 7 years. Now it's not." Grace's eyes shimmered in the firelight. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we take it one day at a time. That's all we can do. And when Cyrus comes back, because he will, then I'll be here. He'll bring others. Let him." Grace shook her head. "You keep saying that. Let him. Like you're not afraid." "I'm afraid," Silas admitted. But being afraid never stopped anything that needed doing. They sat in comfortable silence until Grace finally said, "I was 17 when I married Cyrus. He seemed strong, capable. My father had just died, and I thought—" She swallowed. "I thought strength meant safety. I was wrong. Strength without kindness is just cruelty. You're strong and kind. I'm stubborn. There's a difference." Grace almost smiled. "You're both." The fire crackled. Snow tapped against the windows. And in that small cabin at the edge of the Montana wilderness, 2 broken people sat together and felt a little less alone. But outside in the dark, Silas Ashford was gathering his forces, and the storm that was coming would make the snow seem gentle. The first 3 days passed in a strange kind of peace that Grace knew couldn't last. She woke each morning to the sound of Silas building up the fire, his movements careful and quiet so as not to disturb them. Annabeth would stir next, crawling from the bed to press herself against Grace's side, and together they'd watch the big blacksmith move through his morning routine with the efficiency of a man long accustomed to solitude. On the 4th morning, Grace managed to stand without her ribs screaming. She found Silas at the table drinking coffee in the pre-dawn dark. "I can't just lie in your bed forever," she said. He looked up. "You're healing. That takes time. I can help, cook, clean, something to earn my keep." "You don't need to earn anything." "Yes, I do." Grace moved to the stove, her hands already reaching for the coffee pot. "I've spent 6 years being useless. Let me be useful now." Silas watched her pour coffee with shaking hands, watched her jaw set with determination, even as pain flickered across her face. "Grace, please." She turned to him. "I need to do this." He nodded slowly. "All right." By noon, she'd managed to make bread, rough, dense loaves that would never win prizes, but filled the cabin with warmth. Annabeth helped her small hands kneading dough, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Grace heard her daughter laugh. The sound hit her like a physical thing so unexpected it nearly broke her. "Mama, look, I made a snake." Grace looked at the twisted rope of dough and felt tears sting her eyes. "It's beautiful, baby." Silas came in from the forge that evening to find the cabin transformed. Clean. Organized. Smelling of fresh bread and something else life. Maybe. Hope. He stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, and something shifted in his face. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to." Grace wiped flour from her hands. "This is the first place I've lived in 6 years that felt like a home instead of a prison." That night, after Annabeth fell asleep, Grace asked the question she'd been holding back. "How long can we stay?" Silas didn't pretend not to understand. "As long as you need." "People are talking." "Let them." "Silas, I'm serious. Today at the forge, how many customers did you have?" His silence was answer enough. "You're losing business because of me," Grace said. "How long before you lose everything?" "The forge isn't everything. It's your livelihood. And you're someone's life." He looked at her directly. "There's a difference." Grace felt something twist in her chest. She'd been married for 6 years to a man who valued his whiskey more than her breath. And now this quiet blacksmith spoke about her life like it mattered more than money. She didn't know what to do with that. "Cyrus won't give up," she said quietly. "He'll make your life hell." "He can try." "Stop saying that." The words burst out sharper than she intended. Annabeth stirred in the bed and Grace lowered her voice. "Stop acting like this is simple. Like you can just will it to be fine. Cyrus has his brother. He has friends. He has the law on his side. And what do we have?" Grace stared at him. "Nothing. We have nothing. We have the truth." "The truth." Grace laughed, but it came out broken. "The truth is I'm a woman who left her husband. In the eyes of this town, that makes me a whore. The truth is, you're a man sheltering another man's wife. That makes you a homewrecker. Those are the only truths that matter here." Silas stood and moved to the window. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "My wife died because people valued convenience over life. The doctor didn't come because he wanted to finish his dance. The neighbors didn't check on us because it was late and cold. Everyone had their reasons. All of them good. All of them reasonable." He turned back to her. "And Martha died anyway, so forgive me if I don't give a damn about what's convenient anymore." Grace's breath caught. She'd never heard him speak more than a few sentences at once, and now the words poured out of him like something that had been locked away too long. "I'm sorry about your wife," she whispered. "I am too. Every day." Silas moved back to his chair. "But I'm not sorry about this. About helping you. And I won't be no matter what comes." They sat in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Charged. Fragile. Like something was being built between them from broken pieces. The knock came on the 5th day. Grace was kneading bread when she heard horses outside. Her hands froze. Annabeth looked up from her drawing, fear instant in her eyes. "Mama!" Silas was at the forge a quarter-mile away. Grace moved to the window and felt her stomach drop. 3 horses, 3 men. The one in front was Cyrus's brother, Deputy Wade Ashford. "Stay behind me," Grace told Annabeth. The knock came again, harder. "Mrs. Ashford, this is Deputy Ashford. Open the door." Grace's hands shook as she lifted the bolt. She opened the door just wide enough to see out. Wade Ashford sat his horse with the authority of his badge. He was younger than Cyrus Leaner, with eyes that held more calculation than rage. Behind him sat 2 other men. Grace recognized Frank Yeager and Tom Pritchard, both drinking buddies of Cyrus. "Mrs. Ashford." Wade touched his hat brim. "I'm here on official business." "What business?" "Your husband has filed a complaint. Says you abandoned your marriage and took his daughter without permission. That's kidnapping under territorial law. Grace's chest tightened. I didn't kidnap my own child. The law says different. A father has rights to his children. A father who beats his child. Wade's expression didn't change. I've got no evidence of that. Look at her arm. Grace pulled Annabeth forward, pushing up the girl's sleeve to show the fading bruise. That's his handprint. The deputy glanced at it, then away. Children bruise. Doesn't prove anything. You know what he is, Grace said, her voice shaking with fury. You've known for years. You've heard me scream. You've seen me with black eyes at church. You know, and you've done nothing. What happens between a man and his wife? He broke my ribs, Grace shouted. He split my lip. He kicked me until I couldn't breathe. And your law says that's his right. Wade's jaw tightened. I'm not here to debate this with you. I'm here to give you a choice. Come back peacefully, or I'll arrest you for kidnapping and take the child by force. No. The word came out flat, final. Mrs. Ashford. No. Grace pulled Annabeth behind her. You want to arrest me, fine, arrest me. But I won't go back to that house, and neither will my daughter. Frank Yeager spat tobacco juice into the snow. You heard the Lady Wade? She's refusing a lawful order. I heard her. Wade dismounted slowly. Mrs. Ashford, I don't want to do this the hard way. Then don't do it at all. He reached for her arm. Grace jerked back and Annabeth screamed. The sound carried across the snow high and terrified, and somewhere in the distance a hammer stopped mid-strike. Silas heard that scream and ran. He covered the quarter-mile in less than 2 minutes, arriving to find Wade Ashford with one hand on Grace's wrist. Grace pulling back, and Annabeth wrapped around her mother's legs, sobbing. The other 2 men had dismounted and were moving to help the deputy. Let her go! Silas's voice cut through the chaos. Wade turned his hand, still gripping Grace. This is official business, Cordell. Stay out of it. I said let her go. Or what? You'll assault a lawman. Wade smiled. That's a hanging offense. Silas moved forward anyway. Tom Pritchard stepped into his path, hand on his gun. Don't be stupid, Blacksmith. Grace. Silas looked past them. Do you want to go? No. Then she's staying. Wade's face hardened. She's coming with me. By law, she belongs to her husband. She belongs to herself. That's not how marriage works. Then marriage is slavery, and I don't recognize it. Frank Yeager laughed. You hear that, boys? The blacksmith's a philosopher now. Wade released Grace's wrist, but didn't back down. I can arrest you both. Take the child into custody. Is that what you want? Silas felt the trap closing. If he fought, they'd hang him. If he let them take Grace, she'd go back to Cyrus, and next time she might not survive. There was no good choice, only choosing which loss to take. Then another voice joined the conversation. What's going on here? Doc Henderson came walking up the trail, his black bag in hand. He must have been making his rounds and heard the commotion. The old man took in the scene with sharp eyes, Grace pale and shaking. Annabeth crying, 3 armed men, and Silas standing between them. Doc. Wade nodded. Just collecting Cyrus's wife. She's been here unlawfully. Unlawfully. Doc Henderson moved closer to Grace. May I examine you, Mrs. Ashford? Grace nodded, her hands trembling. The doctor opened his bag and began a quick but thorough examination, his face growing grimmer with each bruise he catalogued. Finally he straightened. 3 broken ribs, severe contusions, split lip, facial trauma, multiple defensive wounds on her arms. He looked at Wade. This woman has been systematically beaten. Recently. That's between her and her husband. Is it? Doc Henderson's voice went cold. Because I took an oath to do no harm, and sending this woman back to the man who did this seems like harm to me. Your oath doesn't override the law. Maybe not. But my testimony will matter if this goes to court. The doctor turned to Silas. I'll document everything. Photograph the injuries if needed. and I'll testify that sending Mrs. Ashford back to her husband would be medical malpractice." Wade's face tightened with frustration. He looked at Grace at Silas at the doctor standing between them. Finally, he mounted his horse. "This isn't over," he said. "Cyrus has rights. I'll be back with a warrant." "You do that," Doc Henderson said calmly. "And I'll make sure the judge sees what marital rights look like on a woman's body." The three men rode off. Grace collapsed against the cabin wall, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Annabeth clung to her, still crying. Silas moved to steady them both, and Doc Henderson watched with knowing eyes. "You've made powerful enemies, son," the old doctor said quietly. "I know. Cyrus won't let this stand, neither will his brother." "I know that too." Doc Henderson studied him for a long moment. "You love her." Silas glanced at Grace, who was trying to comfort Annabeth. "I barely know her." That wasn't the question. "No." Silas met the doctor's eyes. "But I won't let her be hurt again. That's enough." "Is it because enough might get you killed?" "Then I'll die knowing I did the right thing." The doctor sighed. "You're a fool, Silas Cordell." "Probably. A noble fool, but a fool nonetheless." Doc Henderson closed his bag. "I'll spread word about Grace's injuries. Make sure folks know what really happened. But you need to understand this town doesn't like change. And a woman leaving her husband is about the biggest change there is." After the doctor left, Silas got Grace and Annabeth inside. Grace couldn't stop shaking. The near miss of being taken back. The terror of watching men come for her daughter had broken something loose inside her. She sat by the fire, Annabeth in her lap, and tried to breathe through the panic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "For what?" "For bringing this on you. For making you a target." Silas knelt in front of her. "Grace, look at me." She raised her eyes red from unshed tears. "You didn't bring this on me," he said. "Cyrus did. Wade did. Every person in this town who saw your bruises and looked away did. But not you. Never you. They're going to destroy you. Let them try." "Stop saying that." Grace's voice broke. "Stop pretending you're invincible. You're one man against a whole town. Then we'll be two against a town." Grace stared at him. "What? You think I'm fighting this alone? You're fighting too. Every day you wake up and choose not to go back. You're fighting. Every time you stand up straight instead of cowering, you're fighting. We're in this together, Grace, whether you realize it or not." Something shifted in her face. Not quite hope, not quite belief, but the beginning of both. She nodded slowly, then pulled Annabeth closer and let herself lean against Silas's shoulder. He stiffened briefly, surprised, then carefully put his arm around them both. They stayed like that until the fire burned low. That night, after Annabeth fell asleep, Grace asked, "What's your plan?" "My plan. When they come back. Because they will." Silas poked the fire. "I'll face them." "And then what? Fight the whole town, get arrested, hanged." "If it comes to that." "Silas." Grace moved to sit beside him. "I need you to be honest with me. Not noble. Not self-sacrificing. Honest. What are our chances?" He was quiet for a long time. Finally, "Not good." "How not good?" "Wade has the law. Cyrus has public opinion. They have weapons authority and the weight of tradition." Silas looked at her. "We have the truth, and the truth doesn't always win." Grace felt something inside her harden. All her life she'd been taught to be soft, to bend, to submit. It had nearly killed her. "Then we need more than truth." "Like what?" "Allies, witnesses, people willing to stand up." "Doc Henderson will help. One man isn't enough." "Sarah Brennan spoke up for you in town." Grace shook her head. "Sarah's married to the sheriff. She can't go against her husband publicly." "Then who?" "I don't know yet." Grace stared into the fire. But there have to be others. Women who've seen what I've seen, who've lived what I've lived. They're just too afraid to speak. Can you blame them? No, but I can show them it's possible. Grace turned to him. Tomorrow I want to go to town. Grace, that's not safe. I know, but hiding here won't change anything. If people are going to talk about me, let them talk to my face. Let them see I'm not ashamed. You shouldn't have to prove yourself to anyone. But I do, because that's how this works. Grace's voice was steady now. They think I'm a whore who ran to your bed. Fine, let them think it. But they're going to see that whore stand tall and tell the truth anyway. Silas studied her face, the determination there, the fear underneath it, and the courage to act despite both. You're braver than you know. I'm terrified. That's what makes it brave. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Grace, dressed in her plainest dress, pinned her hair back severely, and looked at herself in Silas's small mirror. The bruises had faded to yellow-green. The split in her lip was healing. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd survived. Ready? Silas asked. No, but I'm going anyway. They left Annabeth with Doc Henderson, who'd agreed to watch her. The ride into town was silent. Grace sat behind Silas on his horse, her hands gripping his coat, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Covenant Falls looked the same as always. Smoke rising from chimneys, people moving along the boardwalks. But when Silas and Grace rode down Main Street, conversations stopped. Women turned to stare. Men's faces hardened with judgment. Silas helped Grace dismount in front of the general store. Every eye was on them. We need supplies, Grace said loudly, clearly. For the cabin. Of course. Silas offered his arm. Grace took it, her hand trembling, but her head high. They walked into Mercer's general store, and the conversations inside died instantly. Mrs. Mercer stood behind the counter, her face tight with disapproval. Two other women, Prudence Calloway and Martha Jennings, stood near the fabric, their expressions scandalized. Mrs. Ashford, Prudence said coldly. What a surprise to see you here. I thought you'd have the decency to hide your shame. Grace's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice steady. I have nothing to hide. Nothing to hide? Martha Jennings laughed. You've abandoned your husband and moved into another man's home. What would you call that? I'd call it survival. You'd call it adultery, Prudence snapped. And the rest of us call it sin. Then you don't know what sin looks like. Grace turned to face them fully. Sin looks like a man who beats his wife until she can't stand. Sin looks like breaking a woman's ribs because dinner was cold. Sin looks like a whole town that watches it happen and does nothing. The store went silent. Mrs. Mercer's expression flickered, something like guilt crossing her face before she schooled it away. We don't know what happened in your marriage, Prudence said. We only know what we see. A woman living in sin with a man not her husband. I'm not living in sin. Grace's voice didn't waver. I'm living. For the first time in 6 years, I'm actually living. If that offends you, I'm sorry, but I won't apologize for choosing life over death. It's not death to submit to your husband. It was for me. The words hung in the air. Grace felt Silas shift beside her, ready to defend her, but she shook her head slightly. This was her fight. I came here today to buy supplies, Grace said, not to defend myself to women who've never had to choose between dignity and survival. But I'll say this, once I left Cyrus because he was killing me. Slowly. Deliberately. And if that makes me a fallen woman in your eyes, then I'll fall. But I'll fall standing up. She turned to Mrs. Mercer. Will you sell to me or not? The older woman hesitated. Grace saw the war on her face, propriety versus conscience. Finally, Mrs. Mercer said, What do you need? Relief flooded through Grace, but she kept her expression neutral. Flour, coffee, salt, whatever else Mr. Cordell requires. They shopped in silence, while Prudence and Martha whispered furiously to each other. When Grace and Silas left carrying their parcels, they found a small crowd gathered outside. News traveled fast in small towns. Someone called out, "Whore!" Grace flinched, but didn't stop walking. Silas's hand found her elbow, steadying her. Another voice, "Home wrecker, Jezebel." The words pelted her like stones. Grace's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Not here, not in front of them. She kept walking, kept her head high, kept breathing through the hatred. Then a different voice cut through the crowd. "Stop it!" Everyone turned. Sarah Brennan stood on the boardwalk, her face flushed but determined. "Just stop it, all of you." "Mrs. Brennan," Prudence started. "No." Sarah stepped forward. "I've stood quiet for too long. We all have. We've watched Grace Ashford suffer for years. Watched her come to church with bruises. Watched her flinch when her husband raised his voice. And we said nothing. We did nothing, because it was easier to look away." "That's between husband and wife," someone protested. "Is it?" Sarah's voice rose. "When we see a child hit, we intervene. When we see a horse beaten, we report it. But when we see a woman broken, we call it marriage and move on. Why? Why is that acceptable?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few people looked away, but Sarah wasn't finished. "Grace Ashford showed more courage coming here today than any of us have shown in years. She stood up for herself when no one else would. And we should be ashamed, all of us, for making her feel like the villain when she's the victim." Silas felt Grace's hand tighten on his arm. He glanced down and saw tears streaming silently down her face. Not tears of shame now, something else, something like hope. "Thank you," Grace whispered to Sarah. The sheriff's wife nodded, then looked at the crowd. "Anyone else want to throw stones, because I'll stand right here beside her while you do." The crowd began to disperse, mumbling. Some looked ashamed, others angry. But the public condemnation had been interrupted, and that was something. Later, as they rode back toward the cabin, Grace finally let herself break. She cried against Silas's back, her shoulders shaking, all the terror and relief and exhaustion pouring out of her. Silas said nothing, just kept the horse steady and let her feel what she needed to feel. When they reached the cabin, Doc Henderson was on the porch with Annabeth. The girl ran to her mother immediately. "Mama, are you hurt?" "No, baby." Grace knelt and pulled her close. "I'm not hurt. I'm just tired. Doc says I can come visit his office sometime and see his medicines." "That sounds wonderful." After Henderson left, Grace put Annabeth down for a nap and found Silas outside chopping wood with mechanical precision. She watched him work for a moment, the steady rhythm, the controlled power, the way he seemed to think through his hands. "Thank you," she said finally. He paused mid-swing. "For what?" "For not fighting my battles for me today. For letting me stand up for myself. It was your fight to have." Grace moved closer. "Sarah Brennan surprised me. She surprised everyone. Do you think others will follow her lead?" Silas set down the axe. "Maybe. People need permission sometimes, to do what they already know is right. Sarah gave them that. It wasn't enough, though. We're still outcasts. For now." Grace studied his face. "You really believe this will work out somehow?" "I believe we'll keep waking up tomorrow. After that, we figure out the next day. That's all anyone can do." That night, as Grace lay in bed with Annabeth curled against her, she thought about Silas's words. Keep waking up tomorrow. It seemed like such a small thing, but for a woman who'd spent years wishing she wouldn't wake up at all, it was everything. She thought about Sarah Brennan's courage, about Mrs. Mercer selling them supplies despite the social cost, about Doc Henderson's willingness to testify. Small acts of rebellion maybe, but rebellion nonetheless. The question was whether small acts would be enough when Cyrus came for her again. Because he would come. That was certain as sunrise. And next time, Grace suspected he wouldn't come alone. The letter arrived on the 8th day, nailed to Silas's forge door, where everyone in town could see it. He found it at dawn, the paper crisp with frost, the handwriting precise and legal. To Mr. Silas Cordell, it read, "You are hereby ordered to appear before Judge Harlan Blackwood on the 15th of this month to answer charges of harboring another man's wife and interference with marital property. Failure to appear will result in immediate arrest. Furthermore, you are ordered to return Mrs. Grace Ashford and the minor child Annabeth Ashford to the custody of Mr. Silas Ashford within 3 days of receiving this notice or face additional charges of kidnapping and conspiracy to commit adultery." Silas read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. Marital property. They were calling Grace property. He took the letter home. Grace was kneading bread, her hands working the dough with increasing strength as her body healed. She looked up when he entered, saw his face, and her hand stilled. "What is it?" He handed her the letter. She read it standing there, flour dusting her fingers, and he watched the color drain from her face. 3 days, she whispered. "We're not doing this." "Silas, it's a court order." "It's wrong." "That doesn't matter." Grace's voice cracked. "The law doesn't care if it's wrong. They're going to force me back, and if you try to stop them, they'll arrest you." "Then they'll arrest me." "No." Grace crumpled the letter in her fist. "No, you're not throwing your life away for me. I won't let you. You don't get to decide that." "Yes, I do." She moved toward him, her eyes blazing. "You've done enough. More than enough. But I won't watch them hang you because of me." "Grace?" "I'll go back." The words fell like stones between them. Silas stared at her, disbelieving. "What?" "I'll go back to Cyrus. I'll tell the judge it was all a misunderstanding, that I was sick and confused and you were just helping." "You can't do that." "I can. I have to." "He'll kill you." Silas's voice was raw. "Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But eventually he'll kill you. Better me than you." "How is that better?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Because you have a life worth living. You have your forge, your cabin, a future. I'm broken goods, Silas. I've been broken so long I don't remember what whole feels like. But you're good, you're decent. And I won't let them destroy you for trying to save someone like me." Silas crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me. You are not broken goods. You are not property. You are not whatever lies Cyrus has beaten into your head. You're Grace Ashford, and you're worth fighting for. You don't know me. I know enough. You know what? That I'm good at kneading bread, that I can sweep a floor, that I cry myself to sleep every night because I'm terrified he'll find us." Grace's voice shook. "That's not a person worth dying for. You're wrong. I'm realistic. You're scared." "Of course I'm scared." Grace jerked away from him. "I've been scared every day for 6 years. I'm scared when I wake up. I'm scared when I go to sleep. I'm scared of shadows and footsteps and men's voices raised in anger. That's my life, Silas. That's what I am. And you can't fix that by going to jail for me." Annabeth appeared in the doorway, her small face tight with worry. "Mama, why are you yelling?" Grace's expression crumbled. She sank into a chair, pulling her daughter close. "I'm sorry, baby. Mama's just upset." "Is Papa coming?" The question hung in the air. Grace looked at Silas over Annabeth's head, and he saw the defeat in her eyes, the resignation, the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd fought too long and lost too often. "I don't know," Grace whispered to her daughter. But they both knew the answer. Cyrus was coming. The only question was whether Grace would go willingly or be dragged. That afternoon, Silas rode to Doc Henderson's house. The old physician was in his study reading medical journals by lamplight. "Silas." Henderson looked up. "I heard about the court order." "Everyone's heard. That was the point." Silas dropped into a chair. "I need your advice." "Legal advice? I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. Human advice, then. Henderson set down his journal. You want to know if you should let her go. I want to know if I have the right to stop her. That's a different question entirely. The doctor poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to Silas. Grace is an adult. She can make her own choices. Even if those choices kill her. Even then, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. She wants to be saved. She's just more afraid of what it'll cost me. Henderson nodded slowly. That's love, son. It's not love. She barely knows me. Love isn't about time. It's about seeing someone's worth when they can't see it themselves. The doctor sipped his whiskey. She sees your worth. Now you need to help her see her own. How? That I can't tell you. But I will say this, the hearing is in 7 days. Judge Blackwood is fair as far as territorial judges go. If you can prove Cyrus is a danger, if you can show Grace has cause to fear for her life, he might rule in her favor. Might. Law's a tricky thing out here. We're still territory, not a state. Women have almost no rights. A man's authority over his wife is pretty much absolute. Henderson leaned forward. But judges are human. They can be moved by evidence, by testimony, by seeing the truth with their own eyes. Then we need witnesses. More than that, you need people willing to go on record, to stand up in court and say what they saw. That's dangerous. It makes enemies. Silas finished his whiskey. Then we find people brave enough to have enemies. Over the next 2 days, Silas and Doc Henderson quietly visited every person in Covenant Falls who'd ever seen Grace with bruises. Every neighbor who'd heard screams from the Ashford house. Every merchant who'd watched Cyrus drag Grace by the arm or strike her in public. Most refused to help. I can't afford to make trouble, Samuel Mercer said, wringing his hands. Cyrus does business with my store. If I testify against him, he'll ruin me. Your silence is already ruining someone, Silas said. I'm sorry, I truly am, but I have a family to think about. It was the same everywhere. People were sympathetic, sorry, concerned, but not brave. Fear ruled Covenant Falls more completely than any law. Then they visited Martha Jennings, the woman who'd called Grace a sinner in the general store. She answered the door with a black eye. What do you want? She asked coldly. Silas looked at her bruised face and understood. Your husband. Martha's hand went to her eye instinctively. I fell. Sure you did. Leave me alone. She started to close the door. Wait. Doc Henderson stepped forward. Mrs. Jennings, we're not here to judge you. We're here to ask for help. I can't help you. Can't or won't. Martha's eyes filled with tears. If I testify for Grace, my husband will beat me worse. He already thinks I'm too mouthy. If he finds out I spoke up in court, he'll... She stopped, swallowing hard. I have 4 children, doctor. I can't risk it. What if you're not alone? Henderson asked gently. What if other women speak up too? There are no other women. We're all too afraid. After she closed the door, Silas turned to the doctor. How many women in this town live like that? More than you want to know. Then Grace isn't the only one who needs saving. No, but she's the only one with someone willing to fight for her. Henderson sighed. The others have to save themselves. That's the tragedy of it. They found one ally in an unexpected place. Clara Thompson ran the boarding house on the edge of town, a widow in her 50s, with the kind of spine that didn't bend. When they explained what they needed, she nodded immediately. I'll testify. I've seen Cyrus hit Grace 3 times, once outside my boarding house. He knocked her into the mud and stood over her laughing. You're sure? Silas asked. This could make you a target. I'm already a target for running a business as a woman. Men like Cyrus hate women who don't need them. So yes, I'll testify, gladly. That made 2 witnesses, Doc Henderson and Clara Thompson. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Meanwhile, Grace spent those days in the cabin caught between hope and despair. She cleaned obsessively, scrubbing floors that were already clean, washing clothes that were already washed, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. "Mama, you're going to wear holes in the floor," Annabeth said on the third day. Grace stopped scrubbing and sat back on her heels. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm just nervous." "About the judge?" "Yes." "Will he make us go back to Papa?" Grace pulled her daughter close. "I don't know. I don't want to go back." Annabeth's voice was small. "Papa's mean. He hurts you." "I know. Mr. Silas doesn't hurt anyone. He's nice. Can't we stay with him?" Grace felt her throat tighten. "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Why not?" "Because the world doesn't work that way," Grace wanted to say. "Because women don't get to choose safety. Because the law says I belong to your father like a horse or a piece of furniture." But she couldn't say those things to a 6-year-old. "Sometimes grown-up problems don't have easy answers," she said instead. That night, after Annabeth fell asleep, Grace found Silas outside splitting wood by moonlight. He worked in silence, the axe rising and falling with mechanical precision, and she understood he was thinking through his hands the same way she'd been cleaning through her fear. "I've been thinking," she said. He paused mid-swing. About running." Silas lowered the axe. "Running where?" "West. California, maybe. Somewhere Cyrus can't find us." "He'd follow." "Not if we went far enough." "Grace." Silas turned to face her. "Running means leaving everything behind. Your home, your life. Starting over with nothing." "I already have nothing." "That's not true." "What do I have? A husband who beats me, a town that hates me, bruises that won't quite heal." Grace's voice rose. "That's not a life. That's survival. And I'm tired of just surviving. So we fight. And if we lose, then we lose together." Grace shook her head. "You keep saying that. Together. Like we're partners in this. But we're not, Silas. You're the hero, and I'm the damsel you rescued. That's all." "You think that's all you are? What else am I?" Silas stepped closer. "You're the woman who walked into town with her head high while people called her a whore. You're the mother who ran through the night bleeding to get help for her daughter. You're the person who keeps waking up every morning, even though you're terrified. If that's not heroic, I don't know what is." Grace felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm so tired, Silas." "I know. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of fighting, tired of hoping things will get better when they never do." "Then stop hoping alone. Hope with me." The words broke something inside her. Grace covered her face with her hands and sobbed deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere she'd kept locked away for years. Silas pulled her against his chest and held her, while she fell apart his arms, steady and strong and safe. When the tears finally subsided, Grace pulled back. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For being weak. You're the strongest person I know." "I don't feel strong." "Strength isn't about how you feel. It's about what you do anyway." Grace looked up at him at the face that had become familiar in such a short time. The steady eyes, the quiet mouth that said more with silence than most men said with speeches. And she felt something shift inside her chest, not quite love yet, but the dangerous possibility of it. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Really?" "I told you." "No. Tell me the real reason. Not the noble one. The true one." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Because 7 years ago, I failed someone who needed me. I let my wife die because I didn't know how to save her, and I've lived with that every day since. So when your daughter showed up at my door bleeding, I saw a chance to not fail again, to be the person I wasn't before. That's not fair to yourself." "Maybe not, but it's honest." Grace reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough jaw. "You didn't fail your wife. The world failed her. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because the world is big and cruel and doesn't care. But you care so much it's breaking you. I see it. The way you lie awake at night thinking about every possible outcome. The way you check the door 10 times before bed. The way you watch me like you're afraid I'll disappear. Silas caught her hand against his face. I'm afraid you'll disappear. I'm not going anywhere. You were talking about running 5 minutes ago. That was fear talking. This is me. Grace kept her hand against his cheek. And I'm telling you, I'm staying. Whatever comes, we face it together. Really together. Not you protecting me. Us protecting each other. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting sometimes. Even big silent blacksmiths who think they have to carry the world alone. Something in Silas's expression softened. He turned his head and kissed her palm, a brief, gentle touch that sent electricity through Grace's whole body. She froze, her breath catching. Sorry, Silas said immediately. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. Grace's voice came out shaky. Please don't apologize. They stood in the moonlight, her hand still against his face, his lips still pressed to her palm, and the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then Annabeth called out from inside, having a nightmare, and the moment shattered. Grace pulled away. I should go. I'll be here. She went to comfort her daughter, but the feeling of Silas's lips against her skin stayed with her through the night. The next morning brought more trouble. Silas opened the forge to find all his tools scattered across the floor, the fire deliberately extinguished with water, and a message carved into his workbench, wife stealer. Cyrus, Doc Henderson asked when Silas showed him the damage. Or someone who supports him. That's half the town. Silas began gathering his tools. Then half the town better learn to shoe their own horses. But the vandalism was just the beginning. Over the next 3 days, Silas lost 5 more customers. Someone let his horse loose in the night, and he spent 2 hours tracking it down. The general store suddenly refused his credit, claiming he was a bad risk. Even the saloon, which served anyone with money, turned him away. We don't serve men who break up families, the bartender said. I didn't break up anything. Cyrus did that himself. That's not what folks are saying. Silas left without arguing. What was the point? The town had chosen its story, and he was the villain. But if they thought isolation would break him, they didn't know Silas Cordell. He'd spent 7 years alone. A few more weeks wouldn't kill him. What worried him more was Grace. She saw the way people treated him in town, saw the doors closing, the friendships dissolving, the business dying, and every closed door made her more determined to leave. I'm destroying your life, she said one evening. You're not destroying anything. Look around, Silas. You're being pushed out of your own town because of me. So we'll build a new life somewhere else. That's not fair to you. Life isn't fair, but choices are, and I choose this. Grace wanted to argue, but Annabeth was watching with worried eyes, so she swallowed her protests. Later, after the child was asleep, she told Silas about the nightmares. She dreams about Cyrus almost every night, dreams he's dragging her away while I scream. She wakes up terrified, asking if we're safe. What do you tell her? I lie. I say yes, we're safe. Because what else can I say? That in 4 days, a judge might give her back to a man who hits her. Grace's voice broke. She's 6 years old, Silas. She shouldn't have to be afraid like this. No child should. But mine does. Because I married the wrong man. Because I stayed too long. Because I was too weak to leave before it got this bad. You're not weak. I am. Grace turned on him. I let him hit me for 6 years. I let my daughter watch me get beaten. What kind of mother does that? A mother who was doing her best to survive. My best wasn't good enough. Your best kept you alive. That's more than good enough. Grace sank into a chair, exhausted. I don't know if I can do this. Face him in court. Tell strangers what he did to me. Watch them judge whether I'm worthy of basic human dignity. You are worthy. Says you. The judge might disagree. Then we change his mind. How? Silas pulled a chair across from her. Doc Henderson found 2 more witnesses. Women willing to testify about what they've seen Cyrus do. Grace's eyes widened. Who? Beth Crawford from the church. She saw Cyrus hit you outside service last Easter. And Emma Wallace, who lives next to your old house. She heard him threaten to kill you. They'll testify. They will if you do. Grace felt hope and terror war inside her chest. If I testify, Cyrus will make my life hell. He already has. It could get worse. Or it could get better. But we won't know unless we fight. Grace thought about Annabeth's nightmares. About 6 years of flinching at raised voices. About the bruises that had become so constant she barely noticed them anymore. About what her life would look like in another 6 years if she went back. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll testify. I'll tell the truth. All of it. Grace looked at Silas. And if the judge rules against me anyway, if he sends me back to Cyrus, I want you to promise me something. What? Promise you'll take Annabeth. Grace. Promise me. Her voice was fierce. If I have to go back, I won't take her with me. She deserves better than watching me die slowly. So promise you'll take her. Raise her. Keep her safe. That's not going to happen. Promise anyway. Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then, I promise. Grace nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. That night she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark with Annabeth curled against her side and thought about everything she'd say in court. Every bruise. Every broken promise. Every moment she'd believed she deserved the pain. In the other room, Silas didn't sleep either. He sat by the fire and thought about Judge Blackwood, who he'd met once years ago. A hard man. Fair but traditional. The kind who believed in order and hierarchy and a woman's place. The kind who might look at Grace and see not a survivor, but a troublemaker. The hearing was in 4 days. 4 days to prepare. 4 days to gather evidence. 4 days until Grace had to stand before a judge and jury of men and convince them her life was worth more than their tradition. 4 days until everything changed. Outside snow began to fall again. Soft at first, then heavier. Covering the world in white. Making everything look clean and new. But underneath the snow, the ground was frozen hard. And nothing frozen ever changed quickly. Inside the cabin, Grace finally drifted into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of courtrooms and judges with blank faces. She dreamed of Cyrus's hands around her throat. She dreamed of running and running, but never getting anywhere. And in the dream, she heard Annabeth calling for her, but she couldn't reach her daughter no matter how hard she tried. She woke, gasping Silas beside the bed instantly. "You're okay," he said. "You're safe." But Grace knew better. Safety was temporary. Fragile. Something that could be taken away by a judge's ruling or a husband's fist. She wasn't safe. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But in 4 days, they'd find out just how much the truth was worth in a world that valued order over justice. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. Grace woke before dawn with her stomach in knots, listening to Silas move through the cabin preparing coffee. She'd barely slept, her mind rehearsing everything she needed to say, every question she might face, every way Cyrus could twist the truth into lies. "You should eat something," Silas said when she emerged. "I can't." "Grace. If I eat, I'll be sick. I'm already sick." She pressed a hand to her stomach. "What if I freeze up there? What if I can't speak?" "Then you take a breath and try again." "What if the judge doesn't believe me?" "Then we appeal. We fight harder." Grace wanted to believe him, but fear had settled into her bones. She dressed carefully in her plainest dress, pinned her hair back tight, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her bruises had faded to faint yellow shadows. Would that help her case or hurt it? Would the judge think she was exaggerating because the evidence had healed? Annabeth clung to her mother's skirts while Grace prepared. "Mama, do I have to go?" "No, baby. You're staying with Mrs. Thompson today." "I want to stay with you." "I know, but this is grown-up business." "Will Papa be there?" Grace's throat tightened. "Yes." "I don't want you to see him alone." "I won't be alone. Mr. Silas will be there, and Dr. Henderson, and some other friends. Promise you'll come back." Grace knelt and pulled her daughter close. "I promise I'll come back. No matter what happens, I'll come back for you." The ride into Covenant Falls was silent. Silas drove the wagon with Grace beside him, her hands clenched so tight in her lap, her knuckles went white. When they passed other travelers, she felt their eyes following her, felt the weight of judgment that had become constant these past weeks. The courthouse was the largest building in town, a two-story structure that served multiple purposes: courtroom, town hall, meeting space. Today, it was packed. Word had spread about the hearing, and half of Covenant Falls had turned out to watch Grace Ashford's humiliation. Because that's what they expected. A woman put back in her place. "I can't do this," Grace whispered when she saw the crowd. Silas helped her down from the wagon. "Yes, you can. There are so many people. Let them watch. Let them see the truth." Doc Henderson met them at the entrance with Clara Thompson. "Grace," the doctor said gently, "how are you holding up?" "I'm terrified." "Good. That means you understand what's at stake." He handed her a handkerchief. "But remember, you're not on trial here. Cyrus is. You're just telling your story." Inside the courtroom smelled of wood polish and old paper. Rows of benches faced a raised platform where Judge Harlan Blackwood would sit. Grace's eyes immediately found Cyrus sitting in the front row with his brother Wade and a lawyer she didn't recognize, a thin man with spectacles and a cruel mouth. Cyrus met her gaze and smiled. It was the same smile he'd given her on their wedding day, right before the first time he'd hit her. Grace's stomach lurched. "Don't look at him," Silas murmured. "Look at me." She turned to face Silas instead, drawing strength from his steady presence. He'd dressed in his best clothes, still worn, still simple, but clean and respectable. His large frame seemed to fill the space around her, creating a buffer between her and Cyrus's poisonous attention. "All rise for Judge Harlan Blackwood," the bailiff called. The judge entered a man in his 60s with silver hair and a face carved from granite. He took his seat, surveyed the packed courtroom, and frowned. "This is a civil hearing, not a circus," he said. "Anyone who disrupts these proceedings will be removed. Am I understood?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Good. Let's proceed." Judge Blackwood looked at his papers. "This is the matter of Cyrus Ashford versus Silas Cordell, with Grace Ashford as interested party. Mr. Ashford, you claim Mr. Cordell has unlawfully harbored your wife." Cyrus's lawyer stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Ashford's wife abandoned her marital home without cause, taking their minor child, and has been residing with Mr. Cordell for nearly 2 weeks. We're seeking her immediate return and requesting charges be filed against Mr. Cordell for interference with marital relations." "I see. And Mrs. Ashford?" The judge looked at Grace. "Do you have representation?" Grace stood on shaking legs. "No, Your Honor. I'm speaking for myself." "Very well. You claim your husband abused you?" "Yes, sir." "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." Judge Blackwood leaned back. "We'll hear testimony from both sides. Mr. Ashford's counsel, you may begin." Cyrus's lawyer called his first witness, Reverend Marcus Howell, the town preacher. The Reverend took the stand looking uncomfortable but determined. "Reverend Howell, how long have you known the Ashford family?" 6 years since they married." "And in that time, did you ever witness Mr. Ashford behave inappropriately toward his wife?" "No, sir. Cyrus has always been a devoted husband and father." Grace's hands clenched. Devoted. The word was obscene. Did Mrs. Ashford ever come to you with complaints about her husband? No, she seemed content in her marriage. Content. Grace couldn't stop herself. I had bruises at every service. The judge's gavel cracked. Mrs. Ashford, you'll have your turn to speak. Outbursts will not be tolerated. She sat back down, shaking with rage. Silas's hand found hers under the table and squeezed. The lawyer continued. Reverend, in your professional opinion, was this a troubled marriage? All marriages have troubles, but nothing that warranted abandonment. Thank you. No further questions. Doc Henderson stood. Your Honor, may I cross-examine? You're representing Mrs. Ashford. I'm testifying on her behalf, but I have questions for this witness. Judge Blackwood nodded. Proceed. Henderson approached the Reverend. You said Mrs. Ashford never complained to you about abuse. Did you ever ask? Reverend Howell shifted. I don't understand. When you saw her with black eyes, split lips, bruises on her arms, did you ever inquire about their cause? I assumed. You assumed what? That she'd walked into a door, fallen downstairs. Or did you assume her husband hit her and decided it wasn't your concern? Dr. Henderson. Answer the question, Reverend. Did you see Grace Ashford's injuries and choose not to investigate? The Reverend's face flushed. It's not my place to interfere between husband and wife. So you did see the injuries. You just didn't care enough to help. Objection. Cyrus's lawyer stood. The witness's personal feelings are irrelevant. I disagree, Judge Blackwood said. Overruled. Answer the question, Reverend. Howell looked miserable. I saw bruises, yes. But Mrs. Ashford never asked for help. If she'd come to me, she was in your church every Sunday, visibly injured, and you expected her to beg for intervention. Henderson's voice was sharp. Or did you prefer not to see what was right in front of you? I did what I thought was right. You did what was convenient. Henderson turned away. No further questions. The Reverend left the stand looking shaken. Grace felt a small surge of hope. Maybe people were starting to see the truth. Cyrus's lawyer called 3 more witnesses' neighbors who testified they'd never heard anything suspicious from the Ashford house shopkeepers, who said Cyrus was always polite and respectful. Even Wade Ashford, who swore his brother was a good man, wrongly accused. Then it was their turn. Doc Henderson took the stand first. He testified clinically, precisely cataloging every injury he'd documented on Grace's body. 3 broken ribs, severe contusions, defensive wounds, evidence of repeated trauma over an extended period. In your medical opinion, doctor, could these injuries have been accidental? No. The pattern indicates deliberate, sustained violence. Could Mrs. Ashford have inflicted them on herself? Absolutely not. The positioning and severity make that impossible. Thank you, doctor. Cyrus's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Dr. Henderson, you examined Mrs. Ashford after she'd been staying with Mr. Cordell for several days, correct? Yes. Is it possible these injuries occurred during that time, not before? No, the healing patterns. But you can't be certain when they occurred, can you? Only that they existed when you examined her. Henderson's jaw tightened. The bruising pattern indicates, yes or no, doctor. Can you state with absolute certainty when these injuries were sustained? Not to the exact hour, but my. No further questions. The lawyer sat down, looking smug. Grace felt her hope waver. He was twisting everything, making it seem like she might have gotten hurt after leaving Cyrus, not before. Clara Thompson testified next, describing the 3 times she'd witnessed Cyrus strike Grace in public. Then Beth Crawford, who'd seen him drag Grace by her hair outside the church. Then Emma Wallace, who'd heard him threaten to kill Grace through their shared wall. With each testimony, the courtroom grew quieter. People who'd come to watch a scandal found themselves confronting an ugly truth they'd pretended not to see. Finally, Judge Blackwood looked at Grace. Mrs. Ashford, do you wish to testify? Grace stood. Her legs felt like water, but she made them carry her to the witness stand. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, and the irony almost made her laugh. She'd told the truth her whole marriage, and no one had believed her. "Mrs. Ashford," the judge said, "tell me why you left your husband." Grace took a breath. "Because he was killing me. Slowly, one beating at a time." "That's a strong claim." "It's not a claim. It's fact." Grace looked directly at Cyrus. "He broke my ribs because I burned his dinner. He split my lip because I spoke to a shopkeeper too long. He kicked me in the stomach when I was carrying our second child until I lost the baby." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cyrus's face went white, then red. "She's lying," he shouted. The judge's gavel cracked. "Mr. Ashford, you'll have your chance. Continue, Mrs. Ashford." Grace's voice shook but didn't break. "I stayed because I had nowhere to go, no money, no family, and because everyone told me this was normal. That husbands had the right to discipline their wives, that I must have done something to deserve it." "And did you deserve to be beaten?" Grace's voice rose. "Did I deserve broken bones because the house wasn't clean enough? Did I deserve bruises because I smiled at the wrong person? Did my daughter deserve to watch her mother get kicked until she couldn't breathe? Your daughter witnessed this violence. She witnessed all of it. She has nightmares about it. She still flinches when men raise their voices. She's 6 years old, and she's already learned that love means pain." Judge Blackwood was silent for a long moment. "Why didn't you go to the sheriff? To the reverend? To anyone in authority?" "I did. I went to Reverend Howell after Cyrus broke my arm. I showed him the bruises. I begged for help." Grace looked at the reverend, who couldn't meet her eyes. "He told me to pray harder, to be a better wife, that suffering was a woman's lot in life." "That's not what I said," Howell started. "Yes, it is." Grace turned on him. "You said if I submitted more completely, if I obeyed more perfectly, God would soften my husband's heart. You told me my pain was a test of faith, so I prayed, I submitted, I obeyed, and Cyrus kept hitting me because that's what he does, not because I'm a bad wife, because he's a bad man." The courtroom erupted, people shouting, some defending Cyrus, others defending Grace. Judge Blackwood hammered his gavel until silence returned. "Order! I will have order." He looked at Grace. "Mrs. Ashford, one more question. Did you engage in improper relations with Mr. Cordell?" Grace felt heat flood her face. "No, Your Honor. Mr. Cordell has been nothing but respectful. He gave me his bed and slept by the fire. He treated me with more decency in 2 weeks than my husband showed me in 6 years. But you are living under his roof unchaperoned. I'm living under his protection. There's a difference. Some would say the appearance of impropriety is as damaging as the act itself. Then some would rather I die with my reputation intact than live with gossip attached to my name." Grace met the judge's eyes. "I chose life, Your Honor. If that makes me a fallen woman, so be it. But I'm a fallen woman who can breathe without pain, who doesn't flinch when doors open, who can look at her daughter without shame. I'll take that over a respectable death any day." The judge studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Cyrus. "Mr. Ashford, take the stand." Cyrus stood, his face a mask of wounded righteousness. He took the oath and sat down, his posture perfect, his expression sorrowful. "Mr. Ashford, what is your response to these accusations?" "They're lies, Your Honor. All of it." Cyrus's voice was steady, reasonable. "My wife is unwell. She's always been prone to hysteria. I tried to help her, but she became convinced I was her enemy. When I attempted to discipline her for her own good, as is my right and duty as her husband, she ran away and poisoned my daughter against me. You deny striking your wife. I deny abusing her. Did I correct her when necessary? Yes. The Bible says wives must submit to their husbands. I was fulfilling my God-given role. Correction and abuse are different things." "Exactly. Your Honor, what Grace calls abuse, I call proper household management." Grace felt sick. He was so convincing, so calm. She could see some people in the courtroom nodding, agreeing with him. This was the Cyrus they knew, polite, rational, wronged. "Mr. Ashford," Judge Blackwood said, "Dr. Henderson documented severe injuries on your wife. How do you explain those?" "Grace is clumsy. She falls. She bruises easily. Multiple broken ribs. She fell down our cellar stairs. I tried to stop her but couldn't reach in time. Defensive wounds on her arms. From when I tried to catch her fall." Every answer was smooth, practiced, designed to seem plausible enough to provide cover for violence. Grace wanted to scream. Then Silas stood up. "Your Honor, may I speak?" "You're not a witness, Mr. Cordell. I'm the man being accused of breaking up a marriage. I think I deserve to be heard." Judge Blackwood hesitated, then nodded. "Approach the stand." Silas walked forward with that deliberate pace of his, sat down, and looked directly at Cyrus. "You're a liar." The courtroom gasped. Cyrus's face went purple. "Mr. Cordell," the judge started. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, but it needs to be said. Silas Ashford is a liar and a coward. He beats women and children because he can't face men who'd fight back." "That's slander," Cyrus's lawyer shouted. "It's truth. I've listened to him sit here and explain away 6 years of terror like he was discussing the weather. Broken ribs. She fell. Black eyes. Clumsy. A miscarried baby. Unfortunate accident." Silas's voice was hard. "But I saw Grace the night her daughter came to my door. I saw a woman beaten so badly she couldn't stand. Bruises shaped like fingerprints. Rope burns on her wrists. Blood in her hair. That's not clumsiness. That's attempted murder." "You're exaggerating." "Am I?" Silas turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'll submit to any examination you require. Test my character. Question my motives. But I'm telling you, Grace Ashford came to me dying, not leaving. Dying. And the man who did it is sitting right there smiling like he's the victim." Cyrus exploded. "You stole my wife. I saved a woman's life. You wanted her for yourself. I wanted her to survive." Both men were on their feet now, shouting across the courtroom. Judge Blackwood's gavel cracked like thunder. "Enough. Both of you sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt." They sat, but the damage was done. The careful facade of civility had cracked, and everyone had seen what lay beneath rage. Accusation, truth, bleeding through lies. Judge Blackwood called a recess. Grace stumbled outside into the cold air, her whole body shaking. Silas followed with Doc Henderson close behind. "You did well," Henderson said. "I feel like I'm going to be sick." "That's normal. You just told a room full of people your worst moments." "Did it matter?" Grace looked at them both. "Or is the judge going to send me back anyway?" "I don't know," Silas admitted. "But at least people heard the truth." "Truth doesn't always win?" "No, but it's all we've got." They went back inside for the final arguments. Cyrus's lawyer painted Grace as an unfaithful wife who'd abandoned her sacred vows. Doc Henderson, speaking on Grace's behalf, painted her as a survivor who'd finally found the courage to escape. Then Judge Blackwood cleared the courtroom, except for the principals, and rendered his decision. "I've heard testimony from both sides. I've seen evidence of injury. I've witnessed the passion and pain in this case." He looked at Grace. "Mrs. Ashford, I believe you were abused. The evidence supports that conclusion." Grace felt hope flare in her chest. "However," the judge continued, "the law is clear. You are married to Silas Ashford. That marriage bond cannot be dissolved simply because of marital difficulties." "Difficulties," Grace whispered. "He broke my ribs." "I understand, and I'm issuing an order of protection. Mr. Ashford is not to strike you or threaten you in any way. If he does, he'll be arrested." "And if he does it when no one's watching, like he always has?" Judge Blackwood's expression was pained. "Then you'll need to document it and bring it to the authorities." "So I have to go back?" "You're his wife, yes." Grace felt the room spin. This was it. The law had spoken. Her testimony, the witnesses, the evidence, none of it mattered. She belonged to Cyrus because a piece of paper said so. "Your Honor," Silas's voice was desperate. "You can't send her back. He'll kill her. I've issued a protection order, which is worth nothing. You know it, and I know it. Orders don't stop fists. Laws don't stop violence. The only thing that stopped Cyrus from beating Grace to death was distance. Now you're eliminating that distance." "Mr. Cordell, I understand your concern, but my hands are tied. Territorial law gives me no grounds for dissolution of marriage. My only option is to return Mrs. Ashford to her husband with court-mandated protections." "Then the law is wrong." "Perhaps, but it's still the law." Grace stood up. Her voice came out hollow. "When do I have to go back?" "Today, immediately, to ensure compliance." Annabeth, Grace thought. She'd promised Annabeth she'd come back, and she would, but not free, not safe, just back to collect her daughter before returning to hell. "Wait!" A new voice joined the conversation. Everyone turned to see Sarah Brennan standing in the doorway. "Your Honor, there's one option you haven't considered." "Mrs. Brennan, this is a closed proceeding." "I know, but I have information that's relevant." Sarah walked forward, her face determined. "Your Honor, what if Mrs. Ashford had grounds for legal separation based on desertion?" "There's been no desertion. Mr. Ashford never left." "Not him. Her." Sarah looked at Grace. If Grace Ashford formally abandoned the marriage, if she left the territory moved outside Montana's jurisdiction, the local court would have no authority to force her return. Judge Blackwood frowned. "That's technically true, but..." "So if she left today, right now, went to Idaho or Wyoming or California, she'd be outside your jurisdiction. Mr. Ashford would have to pursue divorce proceedings which take years. And in that time, Grace would be free." "That's not how..." "It's exactly how it works, Your Honor. You know it is. The law may be unjust, but it has loopholes. This is one of them." Everyone stared at Sarah. Even her own husband, Sheriff Brennan, looked shocked. Judge Blackwood was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Mrs. Brennan, are you suggesting Mrs. Ashford flee the territory?" "I'm suggesting she exercise her right to travel. If she happens not to return, well, that's her choice." "That's contempt of court." "Only if you order her not to leave. If you simply rule that she must return to her husband, and she subsequently chooses to leave the territory, that's a different matter entirely." The judge's eyes narrowed. "You're asking me to create a deliberate loophole. I'm asking you to give a woman a chance at life." Judge Blackwood looked at Grace, at Cyrus's furious face, at Silas's desperate expression. Finally he said, "Mrs. Ashford, I'm ruling that you must return to your husband's custody as required by territorial law." Grace's heart sank. "However," the judge continued, "I'm giving you until tomorrow morning to gather your belongings and make arrangements for your daughter. If you should decide during that time to travel outside Montana territory, I have no jurisdiction to stop you. Do you understand?" Grace stared at him. "You're giving me 24 hours to run. I'm giving you 24 hours to pack. What you do with that time is your decision." "Your Honor," Cyrus protested, "my ruling stands. Court adjourned." The judge left. Grace stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Sarah Brennan had given her a way out. Judge Blackwood had given her permission to take it. She had 24 hours to disappear. "Grace." Silas grabbed her shoulders. "We have to move now. Pack what we can and ride for the Wyoming border." "I can't just leave." "Yes, you can. This is your chance. Our chance." "Our..." Silas's hands tightened on her shoulders. "Did you think I'd let you run alone? Where you go, I go. You and Annabeth both." Grace felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You'd give up everything. Your forge, your home, your whole life." "I'd give up everything for a chance to build a life that's actually worth living." He cupped her face. "With you." And there, in the courthouse where she'd just been told she had no rights, no freedom, no choice, Grace Ashford finally understood that she did have a choice. Not between staying and going back. Between fear and courage. Between death and life. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's run." They had 12 hours before Cyrus would come looking. Silas drove the wagon hard toward Clara Thompson's boarding house where Annabeth waited. Grace sat beside him, her mind racing through everything they'd need. Clothes, money, supplies for a journey that might take weeks. Wyoming was 200 miles of rough country and winter still held the mountains in its grip. "We can't take much," Silas said, reading her thoughts. "Just what the wagon can carry. I don't need much. Just Annabeth and a chance." They reached the boarding house to find Clara waiting on the porch. Annabeth pressed against her side. The moment the child saw Grace, she ran. "Mama!" Grace caught her daughter and held on tight. "We're leaving, baby. Tonight. Right now." "Leaving where?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Papa can't find us." Annabeth pulled back, her eyes wide. "Forever. Forever." The child's face broke into the first real smile Grace had seen in weeks. "Really? Really?" Clara Thompson stepped forward with a canvas bag. "Supplies. Food, blankets, medical items. And this." She pressed a small leather pouch into Grace's hands. $200. Everything I've saved." "Clara, I can't." "Yes, you can. I've been saving for years with no particular purpose. Now I have one." Clara's eyes were fierce. "You take it. You run far and fast. And you build a life that makes all of this worth it." Grace's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive." They made it back to Silas's cabin as the sun touched the horizon. Grace grabbed clothes, Annabeth's wooden horse, the few possessions that mattered. Silas loaded his tools into the wagon. He'd need them to earn money wherever they landed, and filled water barrels while Grace packed food. They worked in desperate silence, every sound outside making them freeze. Was that hoofbeats? Was Cyrus coming already? But no one came. Not yet. Doc Henderson arrived as they were loading the last boxes. "I heard what you're doing. Came to help." "It's dangerous to be seen with us now," Silas said. "Then it's a good thing I'm old enough not to care about danger." Henderson handed Silas a pistol. "Take it. I pray you don't need it, but pray isn't enough out there." Silas took the weapon. "Thank you. There's more. Sarah Brennan sent this." He handed over another pouch of money. "And she told me to tell you head for Fort Bridger in Wyoming. There's a marshal there named Coleman who doesn't care much for men who beat women. He'll help you settle in." "We can't repay all this." "You already have. You reminded this town what courage looks like. Some of us needed that reminder." Henderson gripped Silas's shoulder. "Now go, before your courage gets you killed." They left Covenant Falls as the stars came out, the wagon creaking under their combined weight. Grace held Annabeth in her lap, the child already drowsy from the day's emotions. Silas drove with the pistol beside him, his eyes constantly scanning the dark road ahead. Behind them, Covenant Falls grew smaller. The lights flickered like dying embers. Grace watched until the town disappeared entirely, and with it 6 years of her life she'd never get back. "No regrets?" Silas asked quietly. "Only that I didn't leave sooner." They traveled through the night, stopping only to rest the horse and let Annabeth stretch her legs. The child asked questions at first. Where were they going? How long would it take? Would they have a new house? But eventually exhaustion claimed her, and she slept. Grace didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every shadow looked like Cyrus. Every sound was pursuit. "He'll follow us," she said as they passed through a narrow canyon. "I know. He won't let me go. Not ever. It's not about love. It's about ownership." "Then we'll stay ahead of him." "What if we can't?" Silas was quiet for a moment. Then, "If he catches us, Grace, I won't let him take you. I'll fight him. And if I can't win, I'll make sure you and Annabeth get away while I hold him off." "Don't talk like that." "I'm being practical. You're being heroic. And I don't want a hero. I want you alive." Silas glanced at her. "Same to you." They made camp at dawn in a grove of cottonwoods, exhaustion finally forcing them to stop. Silas built a small fire while Grace laid out blankets for Annabeth. The child barely woke, just curled into the warmth and slept on. "We should rest too," Silas said. "I'll take first watch." "I can't sleep." "Try anyway. We've got a long way to go." Grace lay down beside Annabeth, but her eyes wouldn't close. She watched Silas sit by the fire, the pistol across his lap, his profile sharp against the flames. 3 weeks ago, she hadn't known this man existed. Now her entire future depended on him. "Silas?" she whispered. "Yeah. Why did you really do all this?" "I told you." "No. Tell me the real reason, not the noble one." He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I was tired of living half a life, going through motions, existing without purpose. When Annabeth showed up at my door, I realized I'd been waiting for someone to need me, someone to save. Not because I'm some hero, but because saving you gave me a reason to save myself." Grace felt tears slide down her temples. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "Maybe, but it's true. And now, what happens when we reach Wyoming and settle down and life becomes ordinary? Will you regret choosing us over your old life?" "Grace, I spent 7 years in my old life wishing I was dead. You think I'm going to regret choosing to live?" She had no answer for that. Eventually, she drifted into uneasy sleep. She woke to Silas shaking her shoulder, his hand over her mouth. "Quiet. Someone's coming." Grace's heart slammed against her ribs. She grabbed Annabeth, pressing her hand gently over the child's mouth so she wouldn't cry out. They huddled behind the wagon, while Silas moved to the edge of the grove, pistol ready. Hoofbeats. Multiple riders. Coming closer. Grace squeezed her eyes shut and prayed. "Let them pass. Let them not see us. Let us disappear." The riders stopped. Grace heard men's voices low and searching. Her whole body went rigid. "Tracks lead this way." Could be anyone. Or could be them. Cyrus. Grace would know his voice anywhere. He'd come after them already faster than she'd expected. She clutched Annabeth tighter, feeling her daughter's small body trembling against her. Silas crouched lower, his finger on the trigger. Grace could see his jaw clenched, could see him calculating whether he could take 3, maybe 4 men if it came to shooting. Then another voice joined Wade Ashford. "Cyrus, we don't even know they came this way. Could have gone north." "They went this way. I know it." "You don't know anything. You're guessing." "I know my wife. She's running for Wyoming. That means south." "Fine. We'll check ahead, but we're losing light. If we don't find them by tomorrow, we turn back. I'm not spending a week tracking a woman who legally had the right to leave." "She didn't have the right. Judge gave her 24 hours. She took them. That's within the law, brother." Grace held her breath. Was Wade actually defending her, or just tired of chasing law? Cyrus spat. "The law says she's mine. That's the only law that matters." But the riders moved on. The hoofbeats faded. Grace waited until silence returned before releasing Annabeth, who gasped for air. "Was that Papa?" the child whispered. "Yes. I want to go farther away." "We will, baby. We will." They broke camp immediately, not even waiting for full daylight. Silas pushed the horse harder than was wise, but none of them argued. The need to put distance between themselves and Cyrus burned like fever. They traveled for 3 more days, barely stopping. Grace watched Silas grow more haggard, with each hour his eyes red from lack of sleep, his movements increasingly mechanical. On the 4th night, she forced him to rest. "You'll collapse if you don't sleep." "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. I can see it. Annabeth can see it." Grace took the reins from his hands. Sleep. I'll keep watch. Grace. Sleep. Silas. That's not a request. He wanted to argue but couldn't. The moment his head touched the blanket, he was gone. Grace kept watch through the night, the pistol heavy in her lap, every nerve on alert. But no riders came. No Cyrus. Just stars and silence, and the slow realization that maybe possibly they were going to make it. Dawn brought a new problem. The horse was limping. Thrown shoe, Silas said after examining the hoof. We need to stop in the next town, get it reshod. Is that safe? Safer than pushing a lame horse. We'll draw more attention traveling slow than stopping to fix the problem. The town was called Redemption Creek, a collection of rough buildings serving trappers and travelers. They found a blacksmith who looked at Silas's tools and nodded approval. You know the trade. I do. Then you can use my forge while I shoe your horse. Work for work. Silas agreed. While he helped the local smith, Grace took Annabeth to the general store for supplies. The shopkeeper was a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and work-worn hands. Traveling far? She asked while measuring flour. Wyoming. That's rough country this time of year. You running from something or toward something? Grace hesitated. Both. The woman studied her face, and Grace realized her bruises, though faded, were still visible if you looked close enough. The shopkeeper's expression softened. I ran once too, she said quietly. 10 years ago. From a husband who thought fists made him a man. Got as far as here and decided it was far enough. Built this store. Built a life. She handed Grace the flour and added extra without charging. Running's hard, but staying's harder. You made the right choice. Grace felt tears threaten. Does it get easier? Yes and no. You'll always look over your shoulder. Always flinch at sudden movements. But one day you'll realize you haven't thought about him in a whole week, then a month. Then you'll see a man raise his hand and realize you're not scared anymore. That's when you know you're free. How long did that take you? 5 years, give or take. The woman smiled. But I had to do it alone. You've got someone. That'll make it faster. They left Redemption Creek with a freshly shod horse and renewed hope. Grace told Silas what the shopkeeper said as they traveled. 5 years, she repeated. That's how long until I might feel normal. Then we'll take 5 years. You'd wait that long. Grace. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. I'd wait forever if that's what you needed. I'm not going anywhere. What if I'm never normal? What if I'm always this broken, scared version of myself? Then I'll love the broken, scared version. The word hung between them. Love. He'd said it so casually, like it was fact rather than feeling. You love me, Grace whispered. Silas looked startled, like he hadn't realized what he'd said. Because I think I might love you too. And that terrifies me because I don't trust my own feelings anymore. Cyrus made me doubt everything about myself. Grace. No, let me finish. I don't know if what I feel is real, or just gratitude or desperation, or some combination of damage and need. But whatever it is, it's yours. All of it. Every broken piece. Silas reached out and cupped her face gently. Then we'll figure it out together. No rush, no pressure. Just time and patience and seeing what grows. He kissed her then. Soft, brief. Nothing like the demanding, punishing kisses Cyrus had forced on her. This kiss asked permission, offered respect, promised safety. When he pulled back, Grace was crying. Did I hurt you? Silas asked immediately. No, you reminded me what gentle feels like. I'd forgotten. They reached the Wyoming border on the 8th day. Annabeth cheered when Silas pointed to the territorial marker, and even Grace felt something lift in her chest. They'd made it. They were outside Montana's jurisdiction. Outside Cyrus's immediate reach. Fort Bridger sat another 2 days' travel into Wyoming territory. When they finally saw it, Grace nearly wept with relief. Wooden walls, armed soldiers, safety. Marshal Coleman was exactly what Doc Henderson promised a hard man with a soft spot for justice. He listened to their story without interrupting his weathered face, growing grimmer with each detail. "I can't arrest Silas Ashford," he said finally. "He's outside my jurisdiction, same as you're outside his." Grace's hope crumbled. "So we're not safe." "I didn't say that. I said I can't arrest him. But if he crosses into Wyoming territory and causes trouble, that's a different matter. I'll make sure every marshal and sheriff in this territory knows to watch for him. And if he shows his face here, I'll give him a choice: leave peacefully or leave in chains." "What if he comes at night or sends someone else?" "Then you defend yourselves. Wyoming territory recognizes a woman's right to self-defense even against her husband, especially against her husband." Coleman looked at Silas. "You good with that pistol Henderson gave you?" "Good enough. Make sure she's good with it too. A woman who can shoot is a woman who can protect herself." Over the next weeks, they built a life. Silas found work at Fort Bridger's blacksmith shop, his skill quickly earning respect. Grace took in sewing and laundry, grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Annabeth started attending the fort's small school, where she slowly learned to smile without looking over her shoulder first. They rented a small cabin on the fort's outskirts. 2 rooms. Simple. But it was theirs. No one could enter without permission. No one could hurt them within those walls. Grace still woke screaming sometimes. Still flinched at sudden sounds. Still checked the locks 3 times before bed. Silas never pushed, never demanded more than she could give. He slept on the floor beside her bed, close enough to protect, but far enough to let her breathe. 3 months passed, then 6. Spring came to Wyoming, melting snow and bringing wildflowers. Annabeth grew taller, healthier, happier. She called Silas Papa Silas now, and he'd carve her new wooden animals whenever she asked. Grace's bruises faded completely. Her ribs healed. Her split lip became a thin white scar that only showed when she smiled, and she was smiling more often. Then on a warm June evening, Silas Ashford rode into Fort Bridger. Grace saw him first. She was hanging laundry when movement caught her eye, a familiar silhouette, that particular way of sitting a horse that meant violence contained. Her blood went cold. "Silas!" She called, her voice shaking. "Silas, he's here." Silas emerged from the forge, saw where she was looking, and his whole body went rigid. "Get Annabeth. Lock yourselves in the cabin. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Marshal Coleman." "What are you going to do?" "Keep him away from you." "Silas, don't—" "Grace, go. Now." She ran, grabbed Annabeth from the schoolhouse, ignored the child's questions, and barricaded them both inside the cabin. Through the window, she watched Silas intercept Cyrus in the fort's main square. They were too far away for her to hear words, but body language told the story. Cyrus gesturing aggressively. Silas standing his ground. Marshal Coleman and 3 other men moving to surround them. Grace gripped the pistol Silas had taught her to use, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. If Cyrus got past Silas, if he reached this cabin, she'd shoot him. God help her, she would. But Cyrus didn't reach the cabin. Coleman's men escorted him to the fort's gate. There was arguing, shouting, Cyrus's rage visible even at a distance. Then he was on his horse being forced out of the fort at gunpoint. Silas returned an hour later. Grace threw herself at him, checking for injuries, for blood, for signs of violence. "I'm fine," he said. "What happened?" Coleman gave him a choice: leave peacefully or be arrested for trespassing and threatening behavior. "That's all?" "That's all. He's gone, Grace, for now. He'll come back. Maybe, but next time we'll be ready." That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She stood at the window watching for shadows, for movement, for Cyrus returning in the dark. Silas found her there at midnight. "He's not coming tonight." "You don't know that. I stationed 2 men to watch the cabin. Coleman's orders. Anyone approaches, they'll sound the alarm. Grace's shoulders sagged. I hate being afraid again. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to breathe normally. You'll breathe normally again. When we make sure he can never threaten you again. Grace turned to look at him. How do we do that? We don't just survive, Grace. We build something so strong that no matter what Silas does, he can't touch it. We build a life, a community, a family. We put down roots so deep he can't pull us out. That sounds impossible. So did running. So did leaving. So did standing up in court and telling your truth. You've already done impossible things. What's one more? Grace moved into his arms, letting his strength steady her. I'm so tired of fighting. Then we'll fight together, and when you're too tired, I'll fight for both of us. That's what family does. Is that what we are, family? What else would you call it? Grace thought about that. About Annabeth calling Silas Papa. About shared meals and shared work and shared nightmares. About two broken people building something whole from the pieces. Family, she agreed. We're family. Over the next year they proved it. Silas's blacksmith work became essential to the fort. Grace's sewing business grew until she hired 2 other women to help. They bought the cabin they'd been renting, added a second bedroom, planted a garden. Annabeth thrived. The nightmares came less frequently. She made friends, learned to read, drew pictures of their new life, and hung them on the cabin walls. Silas came back twice more. Each time, Marshal Coleman turned him away. Each time, Grace felt the fear a little less. Because each time she was stronger. The life they'd built was stronger. In the spring of their second year in Wyoming, Silas asked Grace to marry him. Properly. Not because the law said she belonged to him, but because they belonged to each other. I'm still married to Silas, she said. Legally. We'll figure that out. Divorce him, annul it, whatever it takes. But Grace, I want to marry you the right way. With vows that mean partnership, not ownership. With promises we both choose freely. You really want to marry damaged goods. I want to marry the strongest woman I know. The woman who survived hell and came out fighting. The woman who taught her daughter to be brave. The woman who taught me that living is better than just surviving. Grace looked at him through tears. Yes. However long it takes to make it legal? Yes. I'll marry you. They went to the territorial court and filed for divorce from Silas on grounds of abandonment and abuse. It took 3 years, 3 long years of waiting, of legal battles, of Silas fighting every step, but eventually a judge in Cheyenne granted the divorce. Grace Ashford became Grace Cordell on a warm July morning, with Annabeth standing between them as they exchanged vows. No fancy dress, no crowd. Just Marshal Coleman officiating, Doc Henderson there as witness, and a promise that meant everything because it was freely given. I promise to cherish you, Silas said. Not as property, but as partner. Not as possession, but as person. I promise to listen when you speak, to hold you when you hurt, and to stand beside you when you fight. I promise to love every version of you, strong and scared, brave and broken, today and every day after. Grace's voice shook, but didn't break. I promise to trust you with my fear and my hope, to let you see me at my worst and believe you'll stay. I promise to build this life with you stone by stone until it's unshakable. I promise to love you, not because you saved me, but because you taught me to save myself. They sealed those promises with a kiss, and Annabeth cheered, and for the first time in Grace's entire life, she felt truly free. Silas died 2 years later, fell off his horse drunk, and broke his neck. When the news reached Fort Bridger, Grace waited to feel something: relief, vindication, grief, anything. But all she felt was a distant sadness for the man he could have been if he'd chosen differently. Are you all right? Silas asked. I'm fine. That part of my life is over. Has been for years. No regrets. Only that I didn't leave sooner. But that led me here, to you, to this. She gestured at their cabin at Annabeth playing in the garden at the life they'd built from ashes. So maybe even the bad parts were necessary. They had 2 more children, a son named Thomas and a daughter named Martha after Silas's first wife. Annabeth grew into a fierce young woman who became a teacher, then an advocate for women's rights. She spent her life making sure other children didn't grow up watching their mothers get beaten. Grace and Silas grew old together. They never forgot the hardship that brought them together, but they didn't let it define them either. They were proof that surviving isn't the same as living, but sometimes surviving long enough gets you to the living part. On their 20th anniversary, Silas found Grace sitting on their porch watching the sunset. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come. About that night Annabeth showed up at your door bleeding. About how scared I was." "Are you still scared?" "Sometimes. But not of you. Never of you." "Good, because I plan to keep you around for another 20 years at least." Grace smiled and took his hand. 20 years. I like the sound of that. They sat in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd fought for the right to simply exist together. Who'd chosen each other every day when the world said they shouldn't. Who'd built a family not from blood alone, but from courage and hope, and the stubborn belief that everyone deserves to be loved without fear. And in that small cabin in Wyoming territory, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and a life they'd earned, Grace Ashford Cordell finally knew what it meant to be safe. Not because the world had changed, but because she had.